Taran, thanks for joining us. Tell us about yourself.
Hello there, everybody. Taran, based in Barcelona. I'm a performance and mindset coach for sales organizations, predominantly tech companies. I also co-found Pitch Lab, which is a pitch mentoring program and pitch development for founders seeking to raise funds. And yeah, happily based in Barcelona, enjoying the sunshine, escaping Brexit.
Awesome. Joseph.
Hey, great to see everybody. Joseph Fung, co-founder and CEO at Uvaro, based in Canada, Kitchener-Waterloo, so just outside the Toronto area. We run a sales career accelerator that helps people launch amazing careers in tech through sales. And so it's always fun to be able to jump onto conversations like that and see different perspectives in different industries.
Patrick.
Hey everybody, I am the King of Swing, the podcast host without the most, the living embodiment of the smiling teardrop emoji. And I also happen to have a day job as the sales enablement manager at PandaDoc, and that's really it about me.
Lovely. Dana, the floor is yours. How can we use the next, just under 50 minutes to help you? I mean, you're already selling deals. So how do we help knock it out of the park?
Yeah, so I think, I've been on here a couple of times, and just to give everybody here some context. So about 3 years ago, I started learning how to speak Spanish in Toronto. I'm from the Toronto area. I fell in love with the language and the culture, and I decided to move to Mexico for a couple months to improve my Spanish and learn more about the culture. And when I was there, I had a lot of different experiences, obviously noticing a lot of cultural differences, people wanting to learn English. And so I kind of had a bit of a light bulb moment. At the time, I was also I had co-founded a marketing agency based in Toronto focused on the mortgage and finance industry. And so that's kind of how I could work remotely. And then when I was there, my light bulb moment was, okay, well, there's nobody that's really kind of being this bridge between Latin America and North America and helping to kind of bridge these cultural gaps and help educate people on either side of the pond, to say it like that. So I started my second company, which is called Doswell, and it was dedicated to helping Latin American entrepreneurs launch their businesses in North America by doing cultural as well as communication training. So a lot of people spoke English, but they didn't necessarily speak business English or know how to pitch their business in English. And I'm sure even in Barcelona, for example, there's a lot of similarities between the Latin culture and the European culture that speaks Spanish. Just so many differences, the way you develop relationships and all of these things, and a lot of it is backwards. And so if you try and approach developing relationships in the same way, you're pretty much not going to go anywhere. And so I iterated on that business a couple different times, and then last year I had a couple amazing opportunities, and one of them was doing a 3-month program for the Colombian government, which hired me to teach 15 different Colombian companies how to enter the North American market. Which was an amazing experience, and it was one of their best attended programs, which was really cool. And it was called Closing Cultural Gaps. During that time, I also launched a course called The Business of Communication, which was more focused on people from Latin America that were currently living in North America and experiencing a lot of these things every day while they were working in Holt Renfrew, KPMG, a lot of kind of the big names. And so through one of those courses, the CEO of Sundevs took one of these courses, went well. And then after, he hired me to do some consulting with him. And then the end of last year, he made me a job offer to come and be their first VP of business development, which I accepted. And I left my marketing company, still have Doswell, which I kind of do somewhat on the side. I also kind of have 2 jobs, but that's just the reality. And so I've now been in this position since February 1st. To date, I've closed about $420,000 of business in under 3 months, which is pretty cool. So I'm pretty happy with that. And really what I'd like to use the time today is not so much talking about the prospecting or, sales side. Maybe in the future, it'd be awesome to come on. But the area that I'm really having more challenges with, I would say, is on the leadership side. And this is, I've run my own companies before, but it's more been, with a couple other people. This is now a company of 80 people. And I'm also working bilingually. And so again, there's a lot of these cultural differences. But also a lot of it is just, okay, there's a lot of areas in the business that I can be a part of because I speak English natively, because I'm a good communicator. And so I'm getting a lot of people pulling me into different initiatives. And as, a new leader from another country, I don't want to just, say no all the time. But I'm also at this point now where I'm like, okay, I am here to do sales. So I need to be able to focus on this and understand really how to create those boundaries internally at the company. And then the second side is the business line of the company that I'm focusing on is staff augmentation or nearshoring resources. And so this has been a really big shock for me because everything else I've sold has either been my own skill set or it's been a piece of technology. So I'm literally selling talent and their performance is so out of my control. How they perform in an interview, how they actually communicate, if they're rude or not. And so that's been kind of a little difficult for me, I think more on the mindset side. But then also there's this kind of transactional nature to this job because people are coming to us because they don't want to pay North American salaries. That's like the trigger why they come to us. And so I'm, when I'm really thinking about more of like my motivation behind what I'm doing, sometimes I'm struggling with that a little bit because I'm like, it almost just seems so easy in a sense. And like, there's not much of a differentiator. And as you can probably see, like having my marketing company and the other thing, I'm really drawn to purpose-filled businesses. And so this has been a little bit of a mindset struggle for me. So I'd love to kind of like get your initial like reactions to that, and then maybe talk through some strategies or things that I can implement to shift my mindset.
That's awesome. I'm wondering if maybe we should work backwards with that first one, like because I think it's a good question, and maybe at least in the order of my screen, I'll pass the baton to Joseph with that first question around, like you're saying, it's almost like the product you're selling is a little commoditized almost, and it is a bit transactional, and that's you don't like just that being the differentiator. And so I'd love to hear some of Joseph's thoughts on that, and then Taran and then Patrick.
Totally. It's a fun set of challenges. So really appreciate the background and the context. I'm glad I get to speak to this one and not the whole leadership dynamic one first, because that's a tougher one. That idea, your comment about it being more transactional, as I was listening, one of the immediate things that came to mind, and again, my perspective, my experience, is that you may not have as a deep an understanding of the place where the buyer is coming from when they reach out. So I founded, I've run 5 tech companies. I've outsourced, far shore, near shore, on site. I've run teams in the Philippines and Barcelona. So the full gamut. Yes, cost savings is one of the factors, but the cost savings is rarely what triggers the outreach. Mm-hmm. Usually what's triggering the outreach, like what gets someone to kind of motivated and moving it, is that they're struggling to find talent, or they've got a project that they have to get started or fix. So on that commoditization thing, something that might help knock it loose a little bit is digging in a little bit deeper about the deep pains that the buyer's experiencing. Because I know for us, like what kills us is we get the project, we're working with a firm and they're really committed. We believe it's going to be on schedule, and then it isn't, and we miss a launch by a couple of quarters or a year. Or the impact, like we get one vendor where they don't do great work and that impacts the end customer, and that's catastrophic. Or maybe we want to take our business in a new direction and I don't want to distract our main team, so we need a partner who will do this kind of proof of concept and early prototyping. So I think there's some emotional impact and deeper impact that you might be able to uncover that might help unlock some of that mindset stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. Thank you. A couple good points. Thank you.
Taran, you look deep in thought, so we're expecting a lot.
Oh, well, I was listening. Thank you. I'll try not to disappoint. Dana, can I ask a couple of questions just to get a bit of further context? Yeah. When we talk about this from a perspective of your relationship with this work in the terms of it's feeling transactional, how is that manifesting? Is it because you're not getting the results from your team? Is it because your direct involvement with the clients? How's that actually manifesting in terms of the day-to-day?
So that's a good question. I think a little bit of both. And so one of kind of maybe something that's an aspect of this is I've been able to open a ton of conversations, and I currently have a 99% close rate. And the only person that I didn't close is in Australia, and it was just a time difference thing. And so I'm really confident in like that side of it. But then when I open the conversation, for example, recently it took like 3 weeks for my internal team to bring me a couple full stack developers that were supposed to be seniors. And when I look at them, I'm like, I know this isn't a senior. I'm not going to try and sell this to the client that it's a senior. And so immediately I'm more panicked about the money side of things, because I'm like, I need to justify why this person is going to be $50 an hour versus 30. And so that's kind of where my mindset goes when I'm going to present the person to the client. And then I've had a couple of clients more so in Canada versus the US, which kind of makes sense dollars wise, but they're, like maximum hourly rate will be like $37. And that kind of starts to get a little difficult. So yeah, those are kind of the two experiences that I've had.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's really helpful, actually. So one of the things, I'm a huge fan of gap selling, this conceptual idea. I mean, I don't subscribe to one methodology, but when you do a lot of investigation, when you do that early stage discovery, as has been suggested, you get more of a comprehensive understanding, and the more you can connect them to the emotional consequences of their problems that are driving the behavior of reaching out or accepting the call, that's actually where most of the sales are taking place. So for me, I found that if I can get the individual to connect with the consequence of the pain they experience, whether pain is a generic but a descriptor, but their experience departmentally and company-wide, the more you can articulate that and go into that, the more it moves away from just providing bums on seats with keyboard skills, and you're starting to position an impact offering. And really what I would say is the way to transfer perception away from transaction to value is by selling the impact of what you do, not selling bodies. The impact of what they can do for your company is multiples of X in terms of value creation. And it's in your ability to position a solution that puts the right person with the right fit and the right ability to become that instigator of change. So you're selling the impact. If you think about it, we are only ever buying results. Whatever you're doing, whatever you buy, it's the result that you're really buying, not the item or the service. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, and I really like the phrase or wording of impact offering, because that's definitely something like just the nature for me, like money is motivating, but it's definitely not the only thing, and it stresses me out when I feel like it's the only thing that's motivating me. So I really like that. Thank you.
Cool.
Patrick, we need to hear that microphone.
Let me bring it real close. First of all, hi Dana, how are you?
Good, thank you for taking this time.
Of course. My first question is going to be around, like, when you first started, did you do jobs to be done interviews with your clients?
Did I do what? Sorry.
Like a jobs to be done interview with your current clients?
Yes, at that time when I first started, we only had one staff augmentation client that was based in Latin America, and the rest were all more like custom software development. So I did it for custom software development, but not yet for staff augmentation.
Gotcha. Yeah, that would probably be my biggest recommendation to you, because it sounds like you feel bad if you're selling them on price, and then maybe you can't really even honor that, it sounds like, after, because the price is different than what you thought you could sell them with the developers, right?
Yeah.
So I would sit down with your clients and be like, okay, what was your situation exactly like with your last set of outsourced developers? And then what changed when you moved to us? What did you like about it? And what did you hate about it? Figure out their honest opinion, and even ask them at the very end, like, is what you're doing now better? And then why? Because something that helps me mentally, not even just in pain discovery, I can go, look, I'm not a perfect solution. No SaaS product or any product really is going to be perfect for anyone, because they're pre-built. They're not custom made for people. And a lot of salespeople come to me, they're like, well, we can't do this, and I feel bad about selling it. You know, as long as you're honest about it, it's totally fine. And you just have to think, is this better than what they're doing now? Like in my case, somebody is doing paper forms. Even if I can't do this crazy workflow they want, it's 300 times better than their current situation. And I'm not going to feel bad about charging them money for a better situation than they're in right now.
Well, I'm a PandaDoc customer, and I'm happy to flip over some questions for custom workflows, Patrick, if that'll make the sales process more fun for your team.
Please don't.
Uh,
Please don't.
Dana, also just to build on what Patrick was saying, quote unquote, success is incremental. You produce incremental improvements in performance. You don't go from zero to Mount Everest summit. But if you're making dramatic leaps forward, from that mindset perspective, I always encourage, the individual to look at the why that they're doing. And if you're saying money was the motivator, but you were talking from the company perspective or your perspective?
I think definitely the company perspective, but then a little bit from mine as well.
Well, listen, it's healthy to be motivated by financial reward because, we all need to function in society. Yeah. But my experience and what I have found most rewarding and what now I teach as part of the conscious sale is this idea that success isn't measured in financial reward. It's about being in service, and the financial reward comes as secondary consequence, because what you're doing is you're positioning yourself as a agent of possibility for all of your customers. You sit on the same side of the desk with them, and you come from that perspective, right? If it's right for you, we're going to make it work, and if it's not, then we're not going to further the conversation, but we're always there. And if you can align yourself with those values and then imbue that with what you do, that will come through in the conversations you have. Money's important, but money actually becomes secondary once you have it, because you realize it's not the driver. Millionaires continue working, but they don't need the money. So there must be something in this, right?
Totally. And I recently, because in staff augmentation, there's a couple of different customer personas, and it's been interesting because one of the first clients I brought on was a CEO of I would say like a small company, but like they do a good amount of money based in Boston. So he's the CEO, not a tech guy at all. Another person, VP of engineering, super, super technical. Another person, director of technology, kind of technical. Another person, technical recruiter. The best person to work with has been the technical recruiter, because obviously they understand, like what I'm going through. But that was the first time where he, like, after we filled the first two positions, he messaged me and was like, "Thank you, you've done such a great job. Like really happy with like the quality of people." And that was like, I knew I was gonna make good money, but I was like, just getting that email just felt so good, and there wasn't stress associated with it. And so I totally get what you mean. Yeah.
So Dana, I have a quick question. Would you say it's like kind of a fair statement that, like, first you said, sure, price is a trigger that gets them calling you, but like I hear often like getting good talent, like good teams, is like it's a battle. So I'm guessing a lot of people in North America that reach out, like they're able to get, I think, probably a really good team and at a better price. So like, how often is it because they just can't even get the talent?
I'd say always price is the trigger, because if people had no cost issue, then they're going to want to hire people, whether it's, like if you're in Toronto, a lot, like, and just what I've seen is a lot of people, if they're going to hire or if they're going to do nearshoring, they often are going to hire their leadership internally. So anybody that's kind of manager to senior manager or director, most likely they're not going to use like a nearshoring company for that. It's almost always for like full stack, front end dev, back end dev, QA engineer, like the hardcore development team side. And so cost is always the trigger, but I do think that a big aspect of that is now it's like nearshoring needs to be part of your business model. That's kind of like if you have a big development team. And then the secondary aspect to that is finding somebody that can get you the right talent. So cost is the trigger to find a nearshoring partner, but then it's a really big struggle to find people that you trust, that are going to like answer you. Like that's been a big thing. People say, yeah, like companies just stop answering me, or I sent a laptop to Latin America for this developer and then never heard from them again. And I'm like, holy shit.
Go ahead, Taran.
Sorry, you've got a marketing background, right? So you understand more than I will, but my partner in PitchSlap is a marketeer, and so I've kind of scratched the surface and picked a few things. What is your customers saying about the value once they've forgotten about the price?
So this has also been something interesting. It has been very difficult to get any of my, outside of the technical recruiter, to get feedback. And I don't know if it's not a bad thing. Like every single person I've placed, their contract has been extended. So I know that they're doing a good job. Like it's not like they're screwing up. But the response that I often get is just like going, well, thanks. And there's no like, I don't know if it's the personality type of like the super technical people, but like the only, yeah. And then the CEO of the company, he gave me some really good feedback. Like the technical aptitude is there. Sometimes they're over polite. Maybe it's like a cultural thing, but those are like the two pieces of feedback that I've got. But then from kind of the very technical people, it's been very difficult to get feedback.
Okay, well, if you're open to a suggestion, it's something that's worked for me when I was running the sales of AboveNet in the UK. We wanted to get regular touch points with our customer base, partly to get the marketing feedback so that we understood what good looked like and that we could shout about it, but also because we wanted to keep the conversation fresh and focused on the customer. And if you don't have a reason to talk to people, then people don't want to talk to you. So we created a customer service role where they had built into the contract a quarterly meeting that involved the customer service agent and a sales or marketing person, so that we had a legitimate reason to go and sit down and ask questions. And it was never forced and it was never uncomfortable, but it was actually really productive. And we found that some of our most sticky accounts were the ones that we got most of the conversations going. And sometimes it was our principal contact, and sometimes we pushed it up. We brought senior members of the SMT, the senior management team, and we did a peer-to-peer to start building that multi-level relationship. We found that to be really effective, and I've suggested implementing that into the clients' organizations that I work with. It's maybe something you've considered or tried, but if not, it's worth considering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things I've been considering is like almost like a cross between like a developer and an account manager, because we're like a two-sided marketplace. And so we have to make sure for the developer, we can't just like put a job ad out and expect the best people to apply. Like we also have to create that value proposition for like the developer market as well as for the customer side. But obviously, like there's so much dependency like between the two. Like, oh, if we have a good client, then the developer is more likely to come or even accept like a lower salary to get to work with this company or the technology. But yeah, what you're saying, I think that gives me an idea of how we can actually structure the position. Yeah, thank you.
Riffing on it, I mentioned this because you've got the marketing experience. A co-founder, our founder that I was working with, had the same challenge. He was having a lot of trouble getting effective quotes and testimonials. And what he did is he started writing blog posts about his customers' profiles. And I think you've got a really good case there. So like profiling the cool work that your customers are doing could help you attract great talent. And I bet if you reached out to your clients and said, hey, can I interview you for one of our blog posts to talk about how awesome your company is, because that helps us attract great talent, while you got them on the phone, you could be asking them like why, get them to say something about why they partner with you, because you're going to put it on your blog and they'll give you that comment that you could use.
I love that idea.
Hey, Joseph, I'm curious, like when you were using the offshoring or nearshoring, did you find it was kind of like a, how can I say this? It's not that you weren't like super, like, was it something you were happily openly admitting, or was it like almost like a sign of almost weakness? And where I'm going with that is that maybe, Dana, why some people don't want to admit it? It's almost like we can't do this on our own here. We've had to go outside, and so maybe they don't want to brag about it. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah, I think there's two things. There's when you're using, and again, I'm not deeply familiar with Sundev's model. There's some where effectively they're acting as the employer of record and they're billing through. It's kind of more like a staffing or a temp agency. In those situations, candidly, it often felt less like the vendor was a partner and more like they were a conduit for talent, more like a recruiter. And so it was actually harder to internalize the benefit that the organization brought to bear. So it's actually a harder question to answer. Other firms bring a team to the table, and as the employer, you're not doing as much interviewing. You're kind of getting the team, and you're making the decision based on their bona fides, and that's usually based on a project or an objective, and maybe it's like a 6-month or a 1 year or a multi-year project. And in those cases, the business outcome was a really big lever. We have no problems talking about it or kind of putting our finger on what the actual impact was. So I don't know how that applies to Sundev's, but that's what I've seen from our experiences.
No, it's actually a really good point because yeah, we have like I just sold a project, so we're building the team, and that's definitely like very straightforward. You know, like it's actually for a pretty cool company in Toronto. So
Cool.
you know, defined scope, yeah, defined like everything, and then the staff augmentation side is more of like that staffing temp agency. So we hire the developer, and then the company pays us, and then we pay the developer, and that's super undefined. Like it's more of like, you know, we have 3 different projects we're working on and we need more capacity from like a front end development perspective. So we need somebody to kind of come in and like fill in the gaps. So yeah, I think that's interesting. And I think that's also maybe one of them. I don't know if it's a mindset thing that has happened or something I am picking up from what you said, Francois, is like, I think maybe there's also this side of, because I know that the trigger is cost savings at the beginning for a lot of these companies, that I'm almost hesitant in a sense to like maybe market that, because I'm like, am I just like now calling attention to the fact that you just don't want to pay people in North America?
Well, I want to jump in there, Dana. I really do, because, so for example, our team is based just outside of Toronto. We have team members. Recently, we've hired in Malaysia, in Cameroon, in India. And yes, like as a founder, as a CEO, you might say, hey, the benefit of looking to hire in another country might be a cost savings. You know, like the risk of hiring in San Francisco is higher salaries. But that's the country, the market. You know, that's not Sundevs. Whereas when I think about the agency that helped us fill those roles, the benefit they brought to us was smoother hiring, faster process, paperwork was seamless. We didn't need to set up a corporation and figure out how we get them paid, because international payroll is a disaster. It is, it's terrible. And so Dana, the fact that Sundevs is there helping to move the process forward has a lot of ancillary benefits, you know, above and beyond, you know, us trying to hire people directly in another country. So there's a lot of value there.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, and back to the earlier scenario where you were talking about the one where it's staff aug and the one where you're doing a project. I think if I look at another analogy, the staff aug is, they might just see you as a vendor. The other one sees you as a partner. And you're way more drawn to this one. And I think a lot of us have said like, yeah, that's going to be stickier, right? Like, you know, if we're working together in our teams versus just very transactional, right? I'm paying you to deliver this service and it's about cheaper, then that's going to be tough to extract a great story or a testimonial out of that, just the vendor.
I think, yeah, and it's interesting because even as like we're all having this conversation, I really do see that I have something stuck in my mind of like that it is super transactional, because I also like what you just said about being a conduit of their company, like that's actually what I see. And you know, like usually after placing the first resource, like within the next week, I'm getting an email like, hey, we have this role that came up, can you start on this? And I'm like, that's how I approach, like if I need to delegate something to somebody, that's how I do it. I'm like, hey, this happened, can you start working on it? Like, I'm not thinking like, oh, I have to communicate with someone outside my company and blah, blah. Like, I'm just, boom, like it's a very seamless ask, so to speak. So yeah, and I do think that there is that partner type relationship there. I've just been really focusing on the cost savings as opposed to like also what comes after that.
So I'm curious, and I don't want to forget about your first question around like a little bit of like almost like prioritization and saying no internally, which is important. But I'm curious. I'm just trying to look at your notes that you sent in the email, and like are most of the inquiries coming, like are these inbound, or are you finding these people? Like I'm curious what those initial conversations are and how and why they started.
So about like 80% has been personal contacts. Like since I started the company. One was an inbound marketing lead on the website. And actually, yeah, I think no, one inbound marketing lead, and then the rest has been my personal contacts.
So you've reached out to your personal network.
One person, yes, and then the other one was people that knew I started the job, and like we're talking to somebody, and they knew that it could be like a good fit for what I did, and so made the referral for me.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah.
And what would you say is that first like conversation? What they're just saying, hey, we're short on resources, or is the cost often what opens the conversation?
Cost is always what opens the conversation. The cool thing about this is that it's been like the shortest sales process I've pretty much ever been involved in. So like I've come every call I come and they're like, so tell me about Sundevs, blah, blah, blah. How do you make sure people speak good English, blah, blah, blah. I tell them about this other company I have that like trains people from Latin America, blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. These are the positions we need help with. I'm like, okay, we can help you with this. We just have to get an MSA signed. Usually they have a really big need for the talent. So the MSA is signed within like 2 days. We immediately start working on the positions. Usually it's literally one call. And then from there, sometimes I have another call after, like, to do a kickoff when we place the resource, but it's like all communication is through email. So that's kind of been the sales process to date.
I feel like you're on the wrong side of the equation of this call today. You should be talking about like the last call Patrick was on, it was like, how do we get people to actually listen to us on the phone? So you have a good problem. Well, that's good. No, I mean, that's interesting. So, I mean, I can see why you're not so much jaded, but you're saying like cost seems to be the only thing, because that is what leads people to, and it's, you don't want that to be the ongoing theme.
And I think there's also like a personal aspect of it here as well, is like really such a big part of me joining this company is to, again, be this bridge between Latin America and North America. And I know that there's such a big bias often, not only about, Colombia where I am, but also about countries like India and stuff like that. Like, oh, are they going to speak English? Are they going to understand me? And there's like these cultural biases. And so there's that part too, where I don't want the cost factor to be the reason they hire someone. And that's the value they associate with, a person from Colombia that has worked really hard, that's learned a second language, that's making a lot of money and helping their family. Like, I don't want that to be why they're hiring this person. I'm like, no, like they are, they're technically very, very intelligent. They know what they're doing. And so I think there's like a personal aspect that kind of bothers me a little bit about that as well.
Go ahead, Taran.
If I may, as a segue to appreciating the deeper dimensions of what the business represents, you go from cost. The opposite of cost is profit, and really what you're talking about is driving profit. So reframe the conversation away from cost and position it as profit enhancement. Discovering or releasing hidden profits or hidden value in the bottom line that has been previously held up elsewhere. I think it's a matter of perspective, and I quite agree with you. You don't want to associate yourself with cost savings, but profitability is a sexier word. Profitability is another way of repositioning that as a segue into the conversation of how you drive that profitability with resources and talent that have, real intrinsic value to the organization once they become part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think you're trying to, and I can understand why. Like you want to get away from the whole like narrative around cost, but the reality is and where I'm going is like the reality is the resources, you get more value for your dollar, and it's not because they're not as competent. It's just, I don't know what the right word is, economics, but I'm trying to value. I think Taran was talking about that earlier, but if Joseph and I wanted to get an amazing slice of pizza, and this place was really well known and charged $5, but this place also did an amazing job, we would look at that as like, for $1, we would see that as like an amazing value. Like I don't think we'd focus on it's cheaper. It was a terrible analogy, but I'm trying to like.
I get what you're saying. You
know what I mean? Like just.
I'm glad you called it out as a terrible analogy, because I was like, where the hell's François going with this?
Somebody rescue me, Patrick.
I'll let you drown, man. I'm sorry. I know we've been through a lot together, but I got my sea legs.
Like the point I'm trying to get at here is like the people in Colombia are providing just as much value, if not maybe more. It's just a lower dollar amount, and you don't want to just really, you don't want the focus to be on its cost, which equals cheaper in my mind. As soon as I hear cost, I think cheaper, and then all of a sudden I hear like lower quality, like you said, lower English, and so I guess I was trying to figure out, and I failed miserably with like reframing an analogy around just yes, it's cheaper, but it's just as good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think I really think that going, because it is actually, it's not even just like, oh, it could be this. It's like, actually though, although it's a little, in my mind, sometimes backwards to think about it that way, it's like actually being able to get the same value for a lower price drives profit. So it's not just the lower price, it's the driving the profit side. I like that.
Dana, can I ask, to your customers, have they done any nearshoring before, or are you typically the first firm they've worked with?
So almost all of them have done, they've outsourced to India. And so the first client that I brought in was a Canadian company, and they switched to us because the time zone was too much of an issue and it was slowing down their development process. So that's also one thing. Obviously our prices are a little bit higher than India. But yeah, so that was kind of like one thing. Yeah, I'm trying to think of something else. Yeah.
That's so the reason why I asked is in your email, you had a great question about feedback around outbound processes. And convincing somebody to buy something for the first time is sometimes harder than convincing somebody to simply switch vendors if they've done something before. And I mean, we've had teams in the Philippines, in India, in Vietnam, and a bunch of areas, and there's always been challenges. Time zone, great example. And I think that's a great benefit to doing something nearer. There's cultural differences that lead to communication challenges, and you riffed on that earlier, and I think you've got some great experience there. But if you can tease out and find more of those differences, that might help you with your own perception on the positioning. But I'd argue those are also great, points to use in any of your outbound activities.
And then one other thing, and this has been, I don't really know how to like position this in my outbound because it kind of feels like bragging in a weird way, is all the new customers that we've had, they all met with minimum 5 staff augmentation companies in Latin America, and then all of them chose to go with us. And all of them, the feedback that I got from all of them on that was that I was just a better communicator. Like I followed up, like I understood what they were trying to do. And it's weird because like I preach communication to everybody, like that's been always my thing. But I'm like, are people gonna really believe me when I'm saying in my outbound, like, we will literally just communicate with you better, and so you're gonna have a better experience? Like, is that just me not wanting to brag about myself?
Yeah, that's you just not wanting to brag.
Great, I just needed somebody to just hit me in the face with that.
Just tell people that's what one of the deciding factors your customers made a decision based on, and deflect it away from, so your ego doesn't smart, and it's this is what people say about me rather than what I say about myself.
But wouldn't it be a fair statement that, Dana, that 99% of the other Latin American vendors are going to have someone from Latin America as their account manager?
Yep.
Not someone from North America that probably understands the better ways to communicate. And so that is a huge advantage.
Yeah. I think also there's and again, this could just be me, but also after being like, I've lived in different countries in Latin America for like the last 2.5 years. And I also know a lot of that bias and like sometimes, very blatant racism. And so I also am a little hesitant in the sense of like, I'm a white girl from Canada, so you should trust me. Like, I don't, I'm kind of like, I don't want that. That also kind of sometimes I'm just like, is that really the selling point? But to a degree, sometimes it is. And that's like also a slightly uncomfortable thing, like because I had like one CEO, he's like, literally, you're the only person that I like speaks English natively and is like from North America. And so, like there's a natural trust there more.
So I agree. I don't lead with, hey, I'm a white girl that speaks English, because I think that's a problem. Number one, if you're really worried about coming across like you're bragging, use us. Our customers choose us because of this. But every time I've ever built a team internationally, we've always had someone who knew us, our culture, our communications, help go and build and ramp up that team. Because the reality, it's not about, I don't know your customers. It's possible that there's bias or racist issues there, but it also just might be prudent planning. Somebody who knows how we work, how we speak, will make the team more successful. And if they see that in your company, that's not something to shy away from or avoid using. The reality is, you'll have a better time understanding their needs, their objectives, translating that to the rest of your team, and they'll be more successful as a result.
Thank you.
All right. I'm looking at.
Yeah.
No.
Sorry, you're dealing with that.
I just wanted, you actually just gave me a great idea for a subject line for an outbound email, so thank you.
I'm looking at the clock and I'm wondering how much time we want to spend on that first question you had around, getting pulled into a lot. And I think would it be fair to frame it as really just like, how do you nicely say no? And not so much prioritizing, but how are you? And I think all of us are going to have different experiences, but probably different ideas on how, because I'd be shocked if everybody here didn't say, yeah, like things come in, people are asking me and I have to say no to certain things.
One small piece of context that I want to give here is, although I've like killed it since I've come in, I've had, and again, maybe this is a cultural thing, like I'm very aware of my time. If I have 4 hours of meetings in a day and you want to book a meeting with me the same day, I'm probably going to say no, unless it's something extremely important so that I can have time to work. And so that happened. And I recently brought on a director of marketing. He's Colombian Canadian, but has lived in Canada and the US for like the last 12 years. And so him and I are really like that. And I'm like, okay, we can book for next Tuesday. That's the next day where I can really, be focused and I have the time. And so we actually had a call with like the CEO and the CTO, because they kind of made a comment like, well, it seems like you guys don't want to, work hard, or you're not willing to work hard. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? And I gave them a piece of my mind. And I was like, okay, you bring somebody else in that's going to sell almost $500,000 in less than 3 months. You would just wait, I'll wait, you do that. And so there's that comment now that's kind of in my mind. And so I'm like, I don't want them to think that, but I'm also like, I love working, but it's not the only thing I want to do every single day. And so, I need to be able to say no, but also just not have this like weird vibe that they think that I'm, like not wanting to work hard. So that's just a bit of context of why I'm also finding it very challenging.
I don't know where to start with that one.
Yeah, it's pretty, because it's not me, it's like
Because that one doesn't feel cultural. Like that's like you could run into that in North America or in the UK or Spain, where they just kind of want, they're like would you say it, I don't want to say boils down to, but they're like, well, no, why don't you want to work 10 or 12 hours a day?
Yeah. And I'm like, I like doing other things, and that's just, and I also know myself, and I can work 12 hours today and then I'm going to work 4 hours tomorrow. And that's just how I am. Like, I'm not going to be able to do that every day and feel excited about it. It's just not, literally not in my like genetic makeup. So,
Dana, you mentioned your other projects in the other consulting firm. Is there any chance that the leadership team is apprehensive or worried about just effort allocation? I've seen some CEOs get really paranoid about side hustles. Is any of that in play?
Yeah, I think yes, there is that aspect of it. And I guess the unfortunate side is like, I was very clear about that going into it. I was like, this is extremely important to me. This also actually helps the Sundevs brand as well because of what I'm doing. So yeah, I think, and there's definitely been a couple comments around that. But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to stop doing it. And that's probably more of my like long-term life plan anyway. So yeah.
Can you sort of expand upon what kind of things you're being drawn into by the other parts of the company?
So for example, one of our big clients is a quick service restaurant in the United States, and our CTO kind of speaks English. But even in Spanish, he's a very technical person. He communicates very aggressively. And so he wanted to start working with this client and being client facing. And so I just got, added to this meeting to do a discovery session about a new like feature that we're building. And the CEO wanted me to go just in case like English support was needed. And so I go, and it was awful. Like, I had to completely take over. I had no idea what I was doing because I'm not a technical person. And then all of a sudden, I'm the client's now obviously communicating with me as the main point of contact. And I'm like, fuck, okay, this is like totally, out of left field. So that's one example. And then other things is, if people need help with English or preparing presentations in English, I'll spend an hour and a half coaching them through the presentation, telling them the right thing to say. If it's sales facing, I'm happy to do it. Like, I really do see that as part of being the sales leader, but it's been for, projects that have existed for the last 3 years that I haven't been a part of. And now I'm being brought into it. And then other things, like today I was added to like a book club that now we're going to have like weekly 6 p.m. meetings, and there's going to be like homework associated with it. And I'm just like, what? Like, I'll read a book, but like just all of these little things. And then there's in that back of my mind, like, oh, you don't want to work hard enough. And so that's kind of a couple examples.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
I can. Sorry, I'm trying to organize the thought as I said it. I should have probably waited a couple seconds before unmuting. One of the things that sounds like, as you've talked about the book club, the meetings, the time, the communication, it feels like you've got a couple of different threads that are intertwined here. I mean, one that seems to jump out is maybe the company needs more native English speakers to deliver in the value prop that you're speaking about. Toss that as something to consider and kind of shove off to the side. Separately, I spend a lot of time with our students who go through the Uvaro program. We spend a lot of time talking about trying to understand the norms of the company that you're going to be working with and making sure that there's a really good fit with those. One good example is we tend to have a culture that's in our sales activities, we have more of a culture of like, here's your targets, your goals, the way you go about it is going to be up to you. And one of our salespeople said it really well. He was at another company where the company's culture was always take a lunch break, play foosball, and he didn't want to play foosball. Like, he was crushing his targets. He was the best performing sales rep. He's like, you didn't hire me to play foosball. I want to crush my quotas. But his boss was like, it feels like you don't want to be part of the team. And for them, their norm was, hey, we get together as a team and play games. And for them, that was actually non-negotiable. That didn't really come up in the interview and the engagement process. And something it kind of comes out is it sounds like there might be, that's not the right way to put it. If the book club is one of those, non-negotiable norms that maybe didn't come up, then yeah, it's worth angsting over it and figuring out, is this the right fit? But if they have a culture where they're not tied up with those non-negotiables, it's not going to be a bad thing if you say, I just don't want to participate.
Yeah.
I don't know the leaders though, so I can't comment on what the actual sit is.
And I think one of the challenges, or I guess opportunities, is like right now, out of an 80-person company, about 90% are tech people, literally developers. And so this is, like the kind of leadership, communication, sales team is very small. And really, it's the first time having a leadership team. And so to be honest, there isn't really a culture in the company. And so I think that's part of what you're saying is I'm just reflecting on some of the other conversations is like, we need to figure out how to build relationships, not just by, daily stand-ups and blah, 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 but like other things that feel good for everybody. It's a really good point. Thank you.
Dana, may I ask, how do these requests, beyond the sort of you're in a book club, how do the requests get presented to you? Do they get presented in a meeting? Do you get the virtual stop in the hallway, or does someone just come to you at any given moment and say, I need your help with something? How's it most commonly manifesting?
I'd say actually mostly through Slack, and it'll be, like, for example, I wanted to actually have a conversation about these expectations. And so on Monday, I sent a Slack message to the team saying, hey, can we book 30 minutes, this Wednesday, really trying to be respectful of people's time. There's a couple of, things that I'd like to put on the table. Why don't we talk right now? Why does this have to wait? What is this about? And that's the reaction. And that's also kind of how requests come through. It's like, hey, let's jump on a call right now. And I'm like, well, I have my this time block to do whatever. And so that's really, it's very informal, but like this kind of urgency of like, it needs to happen now.
And is that coming from above, laterally, or below?
I'd say above and laterally.
Okay. Would it be fair to say that it's predominantly male as a company?
100%. I'm the only woman on the leadership team.
Listen, we've got a whole panel of men here offering feedback and advice. We're perfectly suited for this.
Is it possible? Do you think it could be possible that they're trying to find your limit in terms of how much they can get from you in terms of resource and energy? This is my perception and my experience. I'm not saying it's true to anybody else, but sometimes certainly in the sales teams I've run, the sales teams whom I've inherited, not the ones I've recruited, but the ones I've inherited, want to see where my edge is, and they will push me to see where the hard stop is. Now, that doesn't need to be an aggressive hard stop, but they want to understand where the boundary of what they can say and do and what they can get. So when it's a demand of my attention, it's like, no, this has to be presented in a particular way, these requests. And I want you to make sure you satisfy 2 or 3 different criteria to justify it being given time. Not so easy if it's coming from above, obviously. Laterally, I think that's courtesy as a peer in an organization. But your mandate is to do a set job, a set task. To detract from, I guess, the way your question was presented to us on email, it was like, you how do I say no to people? And I guess the answer would be, in my mind, how would you feel if your subordinate team kept going off and doing side gigs and side projects for other departments? What would you say? What would your line manager say? And I guess it comes down to, do you feel fully supported by the CEO? Because if you get that alignment, then the way that you say this is best practice to be most productive with our time, you're going to get less pushback and being called non-team player, because I've had that cultural experience working for American organizations. You have to be part of the culture, because if you don't, you're a square thing in a round what's it. So sometimes just having that foundation conversation of what good looks like and what performance is expected and how that translates to your peers can then get communicated on a more general level. That may not be helpful, but that's how I've encountered this. And I work for Singapore Telecom, so I work with Singaporeans whom they work on Saturday for the love of the company, and it's completely away from what I was prepared to do. But I didn't denigrate that. I mean, that wasn't a problem. It's just I'm not prepared to do that. That my time is precious. But having to position that with their line management, I was, my peers over there, so that people didn't feel like I wasn't pulling weight. You're pulling weight, $500,000. There's your kind of your credentials for saying this is why I'm focusing on my lanes. I don't know if that's helpful.
So that's so useful, because that's exactly like, like the CEO and the CTO met on the weekend and, and created like a new sales goal for me and then presented it to me in front of an entire team without telling me about it first, because I have hit so much of my target already. And so I was kind of like, guys, like, not cool. And I should not have to work on the weekend in order to be part of that conversation, was also one of my points.
Yeah, that to me, that's a position. Again, I'm not saying this is what you should do, but for me, I would think that if that wasn't addressed and that wasn't stopped as a behavior, that will escalate, because it's the creeping of what can, and it's not an intentional negative. It's just, you're doing so well, we want to keep getting more out of you. And it's at your detriment. You're right. You're paying for the checks they're writing.
Yeah. Totally. And there's, and with all of this, like I also have a lot of empathy, because they're both very technical people. And after that, I actually had a very direct and blunt conversation. I straight up told them that neither of them have emotional intelligence in social situations, and that they need to get leadership coaching. Like, I literally said that exactly to them. And they were like, oh, why? And then I just had like an entire list of my points ready of like, this is not acceptable behavior. So there's like that side that I also, I can see what's happening, and that their goal is to improve the company, but they sometimes aren't aware of like socially how their behavior or style of communication is impacting me or like other people around them. So you gave me an idea for just like something I think easy that I can implement is, if you want me to have like a meeting of like an hour long meeting or more, and there's like a specific request, try to give me 2 days notice and like let me know how long the meeting will be. And if it's like an emergency, obviously I'll do it. But besides that, I can kind of just even implement that one small thing to start creating some more boundaries.
I know we're using a bunch of the time, but one thing that I'd love to share is, every time I've ever chatted with an employee or a team member who's commented about setting boundaries, one of the challenges that they were working on was their internal kind of confidence in their own credibility and position. So 2 things that I encourage you to keep in mind is, the sales that you've closed are amazing numbers. They're not going to hire somebody else who does equivalent to that. And you also just told us that all the customers who are closing, in large part, they base that decision on their ability to communicate with you. And that means you're bringing something to the table. You've got an influence on the customers in the market that is outsized compared to maybe a role of a sales leader or someone that's in a sales position. So own that, really internalize what you bring to the table when you're having those conversations, because it's so easy to undervalue yourself when you have that chat. And you don't deserve that. You deserve to have way more respect and credibility in those chats.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And that's exactly what was going on internally. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, we're at the top of the hour. This has been super interesting. Really appreciate everybody giving up the time. Dana, appreciate you being open about the challenges you're having. And Patrick, thanks for making fun of me trying to have a diversity panel with a bunch of dudes. That was not intention. But Dana, there was another gal invited, I promise.
That's hilarious.
Anyway, I know you guys all have busy calendars, so I really, really appreciate you guys making time. Thanks so much. Have a fantastic weekend, and we'll see you guys around.
Thank you,
Thanks very
everybody.
much. Nice to meet you guys.
Boys,
Really great. Thank you so much.
best of luck, Dana.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.